Oh, thank you. So don't forget to say who you are. I know who you are, but for everybody else, who you are and where you come from. Then your question.
Marjorie Todd from the Attorney General's Department. I just had a query about the extent to which members' needs factor into the investment thinking of super funds. So I was really interested to look at the cooperative, which is located in England, and what they do is they're a mutual, they're not a super fund. Yep. And what they do is they run a variety of services for their members, everything from funeral services through to supermarkets, and now, for example, legal assistance services, so they're going there in a big way. So it seemed to me that that would be a good thing for super funds to be interested in, but I'm wondering, in the equation of this whole social impact, to what extent members' needs are taken into account?
Yeah, look, it's a good question. So compulsory superannuation is a 20-year system, and there were pension funds that existed before that, but we've had a compulsory system for 20 years, and we've largely been in the accumulation stage that whole time. And for most of that time, the assets that were in some of the funds were very, very small. What we're seeing now is that some of our pension funds are getting to the stage where they're dealing more with the post-retirement side than they are with the accumulation side. So in terms of the challenge that you have with the consumer or the super fund member, and this is very, very much a generalisation, but at the young age, what you see is that young members tend not to engage too much around their superannuation. It changes as they get into that middle age. And then what you're finding in post-retirement is you've got a whole different set of questions. And at the post-retirement side, we're seeing that some of the funds are really understanding that members want much more to engage than what is my account balance and what's the income I'm going to get. And I think that's where the opportunity is around the engagement around different levels of services are. But we are literally at just the tipping point of this, and what you see at the moment is a debate in the superannuation industry about where all this may go. The other thing is that super funds are not. There's such a variety that exists in the industry, from the self-managed super fund to the small funds to the large funds as well. And what you're starting to see is different funds. As the competitive environment changes, they start to understand that there is a competitive opportunity around what you offer to your member and services, and also what you are able to communicate in terms of the way you invest. So we'd see that this is an industry that is literally at the cusp of quite a dramatic shift over the next few years, because of the size of the capital, but also because of the fact that many of the fund members are actually now hitting that retirement point where we're actually using the assets they've built up becomes a different question. So I would answer your question by saying yes, it's an opportunity, but again, it's really early days.
Gordon, thanks for your comments. Paul Peters from GVP Capital Advisors. We work on a number of projects that are sort of what I would consider social infrastructure. I know the big debate going on in government is how superannuation is going to fund infrastructure. Obviously, a lot of the real estate, that universities, health, education, there's $150 billion coming down the pipe over the next 10, 12 years. That, to me, would seem to be a good sort of asset. It's in the broader impact investment, but you want to comment on that in terms of its attractiveness or not, or what you're thinking or the members are thinking?
Yeah, absolutely. Infrastructure is one of the areas that we probably spend most of our time. The superannuation funds have a strong interest in infrastructure investment. Australian super funds were probably the earliest in the world to invest in infrastructure, and the toll roads that we see in all our cities have all come from Australian super fund investment that created those. Right now globally there's about $80-odd billion of money that is looking for a home in infrastructure investment from pension funds, not just Australian super funds, but pension funds globally that can't find a home. So the demand for infrastructure investment is real. The conversation, I think, is what kind of infrastructure do we start to create? And in my mind, it's not just a toll road, but there's a whole range of infrastructure that can deliver an economic and social purpose. It's easiest for super funds just to simply go into things that are mature assets, ports, airports, things with established cash flows. It doesn't mean that super funds won't invest in things with construction risk, but you do need a different set of governance, and there's some challenges around that. What I would see is that globally this is the area that there is the most conversation, because, as I said, every government is in the same situation as Australian governments, in that they've all got the baby boom and they've all got the broken budgets. And through OECD and others, and the G20 next year, one of the core issues on the G20 next year will be infrastructure. And the core question they'll be saying is, how does private capital play the role around the infrastructure bill that the countries are going to need? There's no magic wand here. There's no universal solutions that will apply to everybody. What we're trying to do as the association is ensure that there's an understanding of what we do, but that we also focus on really trying to remove the impediments so that we get the actual flow of capital. So infrastructure can be one of those game changers that, super funds, this is the area where it's easier. It sounds like, super funds are almost the fashion model that only gets out of bed when there's $100 million on the table. But unfortunately, that's a little bit of a reality in our industry. But that's also the opportunity where you can actually make the biggest social change. So what I'd like to see is a debate that's not just about the next toll road, but what infrastructure you can build that actually does meet, some economic and social objectives on a broader basis. So it's a massive issue and an opportunity as well. Okay.
Hi, so I'm Steve Hawkins. I was obviously involved in the social benefit bonds with Westpac and CBA, and I think they spoke to around 100 superannuation funds in selling that. And I get the point about the talk and whatever. To me, the main response of the superannuation funds, to be honest, in this debate is we don't do it because we don't do it. Rather than just talking in a $1.5 trillion industry, why don't you, if we all know this is important, get together, put $50 million together and just do it? There does seem to be, Michael Trail bangs on about when he was first doing private equity in this country, nobody does it, now everybody wants to have some of it. At what point in time does somebody in this sector actually just say, this is the right thing to do and I'm going to do it, rather than just be one of the crowd?
Yeah, look, you're spot on. I think the answer first, and this is what we see that our impact investment working group is. So firstly, we need to act collectively as an industry. So we need to have a conversation around that. And it needs to be a conversation that is an investor conversation. We also need to work with stakeholders, and we're not very good at that. But that's what we need to do. So at the problem, we're dealing with a culture which is, and you clearly understand this, very, very passive. You come to the super fund has the attitude of, thanks for coming, don't like what you're doing, see you later. That's a culture that is right across institutional investors globally, that they don't see that they've got a role to create their environment. And, what we're arguing within ASFA is that, that is something that is going to change simply because of the change in the size of the superannuation pool. How do you get to what you're saying is the question. And I think there'll be a couple of drivers. The financial system inquiry, the coalition will call, will be a wake-up moment, I think, for the superannuation industry, because there will be a constant debate in the media about what's the role of this superannuation pool. In terms of creating that investment pool, I think that is, this is the way you build your shared experience. So one of the things that we're thinking about, that we put a discussion paper out that actually fleshes out what an impact investment fund may look like if it was collective. There are models, we have those models in our industry, but I think that's the pathway. It's much better that we all share a little bit of risk here, but also build a bit of mutual understanding. It's more likely that we'll actually move forward. When you hit super funds one by one, you get the same response that you've got. You say, that's not my problem. So this is one of these wicked problems where there's no clear way forward. You can see that you want to get from here to here, and you can see that it makes absolute sense, but how do you actually get there? And it does require not just a couple of individuals, but a lot of pushing and shoving from a lot of different parts to actually get that movement. But I absolutely see what you're saying makes sense, and but how we get there is my question.
Gordon,
Does that answer? Or?
Yep, it does, I think, Steve. We've got time for one last quick question.
Thank
Marita Walker from Perth Home Care Services. Entirely different, not about money at all. We need to think that retirement now is very different to what retirement was even 20 years ago, and that it is actually about the beginning of 30 more years, 3 more decades, and that it's not about just the, it's a whole lot more than about the money. It's about continuing to live a life and have purpose and connection and roles in those 3 decades. And they'll be different between the decades of 60s, 80s and 90s. Is there any sense that the superannuation funds see that there's a role that they could play in what will be their members, first of all paying and then receiving the funds back, in being able to help people see that they have got lots of opportunities and that they could be contributing and not being the burden that the demographic picture paints now, that they could be continuing to be through their 60s, 70s and 80s, actual contributors, and that will make a big difference in the doom and gloom scenarios that are being painted.
So I can probably only answer this personally rather than for superannuation funds, but I think it's just a massive opportunity that we have to think differently about that post-retirement level and how we create a different kind of worker. We've got at the moment the volunteer and the worker, and I think there's something in between. Well, that's what we need. We need to put labels on things. I think locally the example would be, and we know the social benefit of this. We know the benefit to a retiree from connectivity, and that's obviously demonstrated in research. But the ability for, and I think in my local primary school, to have people who retire to play a role in their local primary school, to do the kind of yard duty that teachers are doing. Just a small example, but it's actually brings people connected to their local school and their local community. What the role of the super fund is, I think, is the question. If we just go on being what we are, which is that we see that our role is primarily only the investor, then I think that's also going to be, we limit our opportunity to create solutions. I think what the opportunity is that super funds become, because they're going to have such a brilliant network of post-retirees, and that's going to be a big part of their business, the opportunity is to use that communication channel. How you use that, I think there'll be a competitive part of that. It'll also be driven by government responses, I think, down the track. But again, it seems to me what you've got is this network that's just beyond, investment dollars, but it requires a different thinking. So the answer is right now, no, I don't think there's a clear super fund answer, but I can see the opportunity, but that's more from a personal perspective.
Thanks, Gordon.
Okay.
What we're going to do now is to break up into table groups again. There's only